I'm Michael, one of the hosts of today's webinar. As the head of campaigns at Countable, I'm able to help develop a lot of our enterprise products and manage the rollout and work one-on-one with a handful of our different clients. While our work really varies throughout the digital civic engagement space more generally, I found collaboration with media outlets to be amongst the most interesting of the work that we've waded into. So I'm particularly excited to host today's webinar and sort of facilitate the conversation or help to about some of the innovative things that we've been doing in the space. With that, I'll go ahead and share my screen while turning you over to Alex Coots, one of my colleagues who will begin delving into the presentation.
Michael and I, unfortunately, don't have the luxury of being in the same place today. The Countable team is always kind of out and about as the world of politics in the U.S. is getting a little bit nuts at the moment. There's a lot of opportunities in other cities that keep us on the road. So myself and Rick and our CEO are all in the process of transit in between places at the moment. So I'll give a quick intro to myself as I get into this, and we'll kind of walk through what we're going to talk about in the presentation today. There's some fun stuff that we're looking forward to walking through, some good analytics, some good data, as far as what's happening in the media market currently and some of the things that we've seen from our point of view, which I think is very unique to a lot of the things that we hear. So first off myself, so I'm the head of product here at Countable. I also manage our sales team, and I provide probably a wide number of services to the company outside of that. I also clean up after employees. Sometimes I'm a janitor. Often I buy donuts, little things like that. But I've been in this space for quite a while. This is my third civic tech startup. So I've been involved with civic engagement for a while, but before that, I made a career advising large media companies. So I worked with the likes of Disney, ESPN, ABC, a number of other mid-tier and kind of large-scale media sites, both interactive online stuff in addition to traditional media outlets. And a lot of the things that Countable has turned into have been a result of the things that I watched and saw from friends of mine who were running these companies, in addition to advice that I was providing to large teams of executives at bigger companies. So without further ado, let's get into a couple things. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to look into the first section here where we're going to go through a bunch of trends that we're seeing in the media space that are really salient. After that, we'll talk a little bit about the way that we at Countable have had answers to those things that we've been seeing, and you'll kind of see a logical flow from what we've seen to what we're doing. And then Michael's going to walk you through at the end a bunch of really interesting data analytics for things we've tried, experiments that we've run with new clients and old clients, clients that have been around for a while, and some of the things that they've seen. So it's going to be kind of an interesting three-part flow. The first part is the industry as it looks at the moment. So this comes as a shock to nobody, but the media industry at the moment is in a dramatic state of flux. There's not only changing demographics in the United States that changed our consumption patterns for interactive media in addition to traditional media, but social media through Facebook and Twitter and other sites has dramatically changed the game for how most media sites are working and building relationships with their readers. Whereas, 60, 70 years ago, there were a series of channels people would go through, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to get their news. There were trusted folks that they identify with those brands. Now, they're increasingly interacting with a very fragmented ecosystem of very legitimate news sources and completely illegitimate news sources, blogging, folks that don't have actual experience in areas, and it's very difficult for them to distinguish between them. So what we're seeing now is that people are consuming news from more diverse channels. So whereas Facebook and Twitter, they're sites and apps in and of themselves, but in reality, they're just aggregators of an unlimited number of news sources. And Facebook, if you look at the news today, as well as Google and Twitter, have been testifying in front of government and congressional hearings and investigations into how they choose that content, who's putting that content there, who's able to pay to get that content in front of users. But I think the key message for all that is that not only does Facebook not fully understand that, Facebook is not sure what's going on in their platform, the government doesn't understand it, our national security folks don't understand it completely, we're all struggling to catch up. So media has ingested a lot of this uncertainty the same way that the rest of us have. They're struggling to catch up. You go to the next slide, Michael. So that's kind of not a shock to any of us. But one of the ways that we see this materialize for a lot of media sites, and we've seen this consistently across all of the O&O stations through which we have web access in addition to the interactive sites, media sites that we're seeing are roughly having a bounce rate of 80%. Now, a bounce rate is a definition of a web analytic that says a single page session where a user has a session duration less than 1 second. That's the 0 seconds rounding down. So effectively what that means is someone comes to your page and they leave immediately without going to another page or spending any time on your page, or at least enough for them to develop a relationship with your brand. So one of the huge problems with this is that when bounce rates are high, Users are not aware of the content that they're reading as far as the brand associated with them. And they're not generating a relationship with that media outlet. So they're less likely to come back and have repeat behavior, which is more commercially valuable for that media provider. So what we've seen as well is that, one more thing on that last point, the bounce rates on home pages tend to be considerably lower than what we see on article pages. So that means that the people that are coming to home pages are consistently return users, or a higher percentage of return users than what we see going direct to article pages, as the articles are what is traditionally shared to social media outlets, which is a much frothier, less intentful type of traffic. Good, next one. So what that kind of dovetails into is we see extremely low return usage. So when readers are not aware of your brand, when they have a high bounce rate, and they're not taking meaningful actions that engage them with your brand, they don't come back. And when they don't come back, that means that you're paying a lot of money for expensive traffic that doesn't yield as much revenue. If you have an ad-based model, if it's a paid or subscription model, it's extremely difficult to get those people to convert. Because as we've seen with startups, e-commerce flows, membership signups, people need to see prompts to sign up, or need to see prompts to take an action more than once before they take it. When LinkedIn was getting founded, an engineer who was early on there told me that people on average needed to be invited to LinkedIn 8 times before they actually decided to create an account. That means return usage is one of the key elements of high value behaviors. Conversion rates, account creations, buying things. So on top of that, we see extremely low brand recognition. So in a previous life, I ran user experience research for a number of the media companies that I mentioned before, where we'd put surveys, and then we would talk to people. We put surveys on the web to find their demographic information, then we reached out to them to get a representative sample of their users and ask them about their interactions with that brand. What we saw is that people that we were interviewing, even off of major media brands, who answered a survey and opted into user research on the site of the media provider that we were working with, those people didn't have any recollection of that media provider whatsoever. They had an extremely low level of brand recognition, despite the fact that they'd agreed to an interview with that brand in and of itself. So what we see here is that because bounce rates are high, because return usage is very low, content is becoming more article-based, less brand-based. So I've seen a bunch of compelling pitches from startups lately to accommodate the changing media ecosystem that say, in the future of media, it will be less brand focused, so it won't be CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC as much. It'll be individual writers and authors who are creating content and establishing relationships with their readers. Now, that's not for any other purpose than brands are not doing a good job of that now, and we see that brand recognition continuing to erode. So another huge one is that we tell this to all of our media partners, Mark Zuckerberg is not your friend. Twitter is not your friend. Google is not your friend. We see a lot of media sites that have a dramatic over-reliance on social channels. Facebook is a channel, as every other social media network is. Facebook is a channel that you do not control. We've seen media sites lose 20 to 30% of their traffic overnight when Facebook makes a change to their ranking algorithm for what gets shown to users in news feeds. There are media sites who have millions of followers, but their average post reach, when they're not paying for it, their organic post reach, despite having millions of followers, maybe a couple thousand, 10,000, maybe 100,000 folks. It's typically an order of magnitude or less, fewer people they're actually reaching than are following their page. And all of that is because Facebook is creating a very optimized ecosystem for getting brands to pay for traffic to their site. So when you don't pay, your audience doesn't see your content. On top of that, traffic that comes through Facebook is low intentful traffic, meaning people are scrolling through a ton of different articles when they're likely to see your content, and when they finally do click through, they've seen so many other things that their likelihood of having a connection with your brand, of being aware of your brand, is lower because it's happening in a feed of things. We call this the Tinder effect. In Tinder, people are swiping through dating apps, swiping through people left and right. They're not spending time to generate an actual level of interest in the person, which leads to them devaluing them. The same exact thing that Twitter is doing to dating, social media is doing to news. On top of that, there's very much one-sided relationships. So tech is continuing to blur this line between communications and content. Journalists have, as you can see here on the slide, always produced while readers consume, but now we're waking up to mobile notifications, push notifications, email notifications, text, tweets. We have this incredibly complicated cacophony of notifications coming in, and as a result, I'm consuming based on whatever's getting sent to me as opposed to me making an active decision. I don't have as much agency in the choices because all these social media channels are optimizing the message delivery so much so that I don't have to seek the news out. It's thrust upon me, which is dramatically changing the type of conversation that people have with major media brands. So how do you solve this? How do you fight back against this rising tide of a complex ecosystem that's changing the factors of control away from the people creating content towards the channels through which the content is being sent? Well, in Silicon Valley and in product-based companies, the way that we solve this problem is creating something called value chains. Value chains are, let's take the concept of Amazon, for instance. So if I go on Amazon today and I want to buy something, there's a series of actions that I take before I'm going to make that purchase. And then there's a series of actions after I make that purchase where Amazon will re-engage me with content and make me buy more things that are related to purchases that I've made in the past. And we've all seen this. Amazon calls it collaborative filtering algorithms, where they're making recommendations to you based on things you want. But all of that is to progress you down this value chain. Let's take an example. So for the media side, a value chain starts off with a very easy, light form action, as we call it. This could be someone answering a poll question, saying yes or no. It could be someone just consuming your content, the lightest possible interaction with your brand. Now, past that, there's more engaged actions that a user takes. And ideally, if a product is well designed, it's progressing users from light form actions to heavier actions that increase their level of engagement over time to the point where at the end, if they're able to effectively get users to hit the end of the value chain, there are a large number of very engaged users who are coming back, are aware of the brand, and not only that, become evangelists for it. These are the people that are sharing your content on a regular basis, that are signing up for accounts, that are paying for things. This is the apogee of product design, but it's not a thing that media has woken up to yet. Very few media companies are beginning to experiment with this. But Silicon Valley companies and product-based companies live and die by this purpose. So in a lot of cases, what innovation is, to take a step back for a moment, what innovation is applying a concept that was intended for a different purpose to your use case. That's what we're recommending here. Take a concept designed for product development firms, for design companies, and put it into a media use case. And that's basically the way that we've built our product here at Countable. So you can press the next slide, Michael. So let's talk a little bit about Countable solutions. So effectively what we've done is we've built a value chain in a box for media companies. So when I come on a news site, let's just take a human example, and I'm reading an article about lead in the water in Flint, Michigan, and I get very angry. Why is this happening? Who's responsible for this? I want to do something about it. I have a couple different avenues I can take. I can go to Facebook, which then immediately takes the focus away from the place where I read the article. I'm now inside of Facebook, and everything Facebook is designed to do is to keep me on Facebook, so I'm not interacting with your site again. I want to get, as Facebook, I want to get users off your site onto Facebook and keep them there. So I can share, if I read this article on your site, I can get angry and I can go to Facebook. I can text a friend, I can do all kinds of things. But what if that article, what if that news site could provide a high value action associated with their content inside of the article page where a user can progress down a very meaningful value chain, take that action without ever leaving the site? So what you see here are a couple different ways we do that on Countable. So this is one of our partners, KSTP, which is an ABC station in Minneapolis, one of our favorite partners, because they've done a lot of really cool stuff, where they're actually capturing user-generated content videos. So we call them UGC in many cases, user-generated content. So when I read an article and I get angry, I have that peak of emotional feeling. Now I can create a video. And when I create that video, there's the possibility that it will be seen by the news team at KSTP. It could be played on air. And that's part of something we talk about. Send us a video and you may be played on air. That's a huge driver for people. And at the end of recording that video, and all this is done inside of KSTP, you see it populate on the page and you're given an option to share that video and share that you created a video out to social media to get other people to do the same. It's a very powerful ask. Now, another thing to add on that is when you share video content as a user to Facebook, Facebook is artificially pumping that content type up inside of news feeds. So on Facebook, they're trying to get different types of content in feeds. And right now, Facebook is really investing heavily in video-based content. They're paying large brands to create video content. But on the pyramid of things that get seen at the bottom is unpaid content. On top of that is paid content. But on top of that is organic video-based content created by users is almost guaranteed to be seen by people in their network. So it's a very effective way of hacking the Facebook ad algorithm. On top of that, we allow people to take civic action inside of pages, which you see here on the right. This is a situation where we are actually showing elected representatives for wherever that user is. If they're in Minneapolis, they'll see their Minneapolis reps. We'll see other folks. We'll talk more about the solution in depth later. But this is where they're actually taking a civic action inside of that page, reaching out to their reps, sending them a message. This is an incredibly valuable action for users. They very rarely have ever reached out to their elected representative before. It's a meaningful thing. It feels like jury duty. So when they take it, they're much more likely to come back and be engaged. And we have some incredible data, which Michael will show later, that shows exactly what happens here and how this changes people's perspective of brands. So as you can see here, just a little bit background on Accountable. As we got into this, we started off as a civic engagement company. We built a series of consumer applications, which you can see if you go into the iTunes market or the Android market, that talk about civic engagement. What's really the DNA of the company. We intended to start a company that got people much more engaged with their government, that made it easier for them to engage with their government for the first time. So if you go into the App Store, now you can download Countable and take a look at it, see the types of things we do. Here's a quick snapshot of our team. We have Bart Myers, our founder, myself, our head of product. We have Rick Kaplan, who senior vice president, extremely well traveled in the media world, really found us because he was very excited about the things we were working on and has been one of our most ardent supporters. Rick unfortunately can't be with us on the call today, but he's given me a couple of things to read out so I can channel Rick Kaplan for you, which is going to be very difficult because he's a huge personality, great guy. We have Andrea Seabrook, who's our managing editor, who was previously the senior editor and Washington bureau chief for Marketplace, so has a deep pedigree in media as well, as Rick does. Marie Kerr is in charge of marketing. Is really a marketing creative, worked at places and with brands like Nintendo, EA, Twitch, and Razoo. We actually work together there. Ishna Ghazal, who's our head of sales, who you all may have spoken with in the past, or more may meet in the future, with a lot of deep experience in the advocacy and engagement space. So a couple highlights real quick of things we've accomplished, and this dovetails into things we've done with partners. As you can see here, we've raised venture capital. We're a venture-funded company out here in the Bay Area. So far, since we've been founded, we've sent 200 million notifications to users based on things that they're likely to engage with, which is partly stuff we do with partners. So often we'll engage with partners and help them engage their users or their audience around taking high-value actions. Could be civic, could be advocacy related, could be user-generated content to get them to engage. We've done that very successfully. So there's a lot. All of the products that we sell to our users have all this baked into the DNA of this experience. We facilitated roughly 11 and close to be 12 million messages sent to Congress and lawmakers so far. And we have about 1.5 million monthly active unique users across all of our platforms. If you include our partners and the reach that they have, it's probably closer to 10 million people that we're reaching on a monthly basis with the content that we have. And on top of that, we've got press. You can look us up in a lot of different places: Politico, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Wired, GQ, all over the place. It has really been a moment for civic engagement. So when we got started, just to give you a bit of the background on the company, we really just wrote legislative summaries. If you wanted Accountable, it was a feed of non-biased summaries of legislation through which people could get engaged. And what that kind of created was this pathway of building digital civic engagement tools. As you can see here, here's one on the screen that shows you how people can see content, be presented with a call to action, send a message, call a rep, or record a video message. This is all something that you can do inside of our iOS app today. But from that, I had a bunch of friends and from the companies that I advised in the past who were running media companies. And for some of the reasons we mentioned at the beginning when we did the market overview, my friends in the media space were dying for some type of civic action or some high value chain that they can put inside their sites. So on a lark, without quite frankly telling the rest of the Accountable team, it was just kind of a guess, we designed and pitched them on exactly what you see here, which is a tool that we offer today, which is an embeddable widget, which is a copy and paste one line of JavaScript that fits inside of other people's pages. It could be an article page on a news site. It could be an advocacy organization. It could be any website that geolocates users where they are. And as we mentioned before, presents them with their elected representative and gives them a menu of ways of which they can reach out. You can collect videos from your audience through this tool as well, and then there's embeddable galleries that can go on your page. So I can not only record video, but I can see videos from other users, which creates an element of something called social proof. So in UX design, when we are designing features, one of the most powerful tools that UX designers have access to is something called social proofing. That's like Yelp or like Google or Zagat, where you can basically see reviews from other users that let you know that something is a good idea. That's using the wisdom of crowds. The same thing happens with high value actions on a site. That's why if you go on hotels.com and you're looking to book a hotel room, they'll say 45 other people are looking at this hotel. Not only does that give social proofing, but that creates an element of urgency for people to take an action. We're doing the same thing, but in a civic and advocacy context. We're showing a gallery of videos, which is again embeddable on your page through copy and pasting a line of JavaScript through which you have full access and control of to post videos alongside a call to action to make people much more likely to convert and engage. The app supports web and mobile use cases. We have, as you can see here, one of our main customers that we like to talk about a lot is Starbucks. We provide something called an action center for them, which is a web and mobile-based platform where they can take action for their actual employees. Cool. So now I'm going to hand it over to Michael, and I'm going to put myself on mute. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, Michael will put up contact information at the end of the presentation. You're welcome to reach out to him or myself directly. My email address is just alex@countable.us. Anyway, thanks, Michael. Take it away.
Perfect. With that, we'll delve into a couple of case studies and show you guys some performance metrics, integration processes, things that have worked really well for some of our existing media clients. The first thing when getting started with any sort of media implementation is upfront integration. We start by working with the in-house development or IT team and integrating our action tools into their CMS. We'll essentially be creating static objects in their CMS that don't require any sort of technical knowledge, expertise, or engagement with JavaScript or HTML code, so that their newsroom or their editors, when sifting through and creating a story or piece of content, can just select this static object like in a visual editor and drop and paste it, into select and drop it into the CMS, into the story. So they'll essentially be dropping in widget 1, widget 2, video widget, civic outreach widget, in order to make their tools more seamlessly actionable. So that's sort of step 1. Step 2 is working with that same in-house digital team on mobile optimization, making sure that both of our widgets and our respective tools render seamlessly in the iOS and Android experiences that the organization or journalistic outlet uses. And then thirdly is creation of an intentional digital presence in home base. This tends to start with the creation of a new actionable issue page. You could imagine the weather page or the breaking news page. Well, similarly, a lot of our partners will end up creating an actionable page. So that users and audience members can organically find all of their actionable content and navigate to it via their website. Then there's embedding that issue page into a handful of different highly trafficked places in the site. It could be the upper navigation, oftentimes the right rail. Once you have that initial integration out of the way, you're off to the races, and step 2 comes into play. That's really working with the editorial team or the newsroom to help them identify potentially excellent actionable stories, the type of content that's likely to resonate with users and convert really well, engage them and sort of bring them into this value chain fold that Alex was alluding to earlier. At that point, there's really nothing stopping them. The floodgates are open. They can begin embedding their respective tools, the video testimonial widget and the civic action widget, into different stories, and begin seeing how everything performs. So we've aggregated a handful of data from different clients, both past and present, and sort of average them into the figures that you see here on the screen. If a client, if a media partner ends up receiving about 1 million impressions on different pieces of content that are utilizing these different tools, we expect to see something on the order of just over 7% click-through rate, meaning of those 1 million or so unique impressions, about 7% of the unique impressions will end up engaging with the different widgets that have been embedded into the page. Of those 70,000 engagements, we tend to see just over a 24% conversion rate in aggregate, meaning that 24% of unique engagements will end up converting into a sort of final action, either submitting a video message to the news outlet or organization, or completing the message sending flow and sending a unique message to their lawmaker or lawmakers. This ends up resulting in, of the 1 million or so impressions, just over 17,000 unique action takers. So how does
And just one thing to add on that, Michael, real quick. So to put that in context, we compare our tools to ad units that get embedded on pages. So if you look at the average conversion rate for an ad unit or the average interaction rate, you're looking at 0.07% of people are actively engaging with it. With our widgets, they're 7%, which is several orders of magnitude above what we would compare it to or the closest possible use case, which is exciting for us.
Yeah, tremendously. It tends to be amongst the most performant elements in any of the stories that any of our media partners have ever embedded. So say that you have those 17,000 unique action takers. Just to lend some perspective and sort of make it more resonant, those individuals, because you sort of get more bang for your buck, so to speak, and that you can send messages to multiple lawmakers simultaneously, and that we're able to render more than a single lawmaker who's relevant to a particular news story in the widget at once, you end up seeing upwards of 51,000 unique messages sent to lawmakers just from those 17,000 or so individuals who took action, just on the Civic Action platform itself. If you were to print out those messages, fold them into envelopes, lay them in a long line, that line would stretch for over 7.5 miles, just to lend some perspective in terms of the sheer volume of messages and personalized user-generated content that's both being created and sent. The content of the messages tends to be unbelievably impactful and impassioned too. You can see by sort of taking a glance at the screen here, a screenshot or snapshot of some of the different pieces of content that users are creating and then sending to their lawmakers, but they really tend to cut to the core of an issue. They're incredibly thoughtful. Very seldom are they default copy or anything that's cookie cutter. It tends to really cut to the core of who they are and what their perspective is and why they care about this issue. One of the things that I think is even more impactful though than the text-based user-generated content, and this is something that Alex was alluding to earlier with regard to user-generated content and social proofing, are the video submissions that come through both the Civic Action tool and the video testimonial tool. You know, we were actually a little bit nervous when first launching the video capture tool, because we were wondering if nothing like this has ever existed before in a media, journalistic, or civic context, and we were wondering if people were going to abuse the tool, or if we would have to filter out lots of adult content before submitting messages and letting the messages filter through and be submitted to our media partners. It's turned out quite oppositely. We have been, quite frankly, blown away by the sheer volume and caliber of the video messages being submitted. I think it has something to do with the lack of anonymity. Because individuals are seeing their images rendered on the screen in front of them, they're able to hear the inflection in their voice. They're able to play back the story and perspective that's unique to them that they're sharing. They feel a sense of investment in the content that's being created in a way that they don't when they're just writing a text-based comment that's publicly available on Reddit or on Forum X. You can see here that, for instance, Julianne, a foster mother, was talking about Vaya, her foster daughter, and the girl she hoped to adopt. Or Hannah, this 11-year-old from Massachusetts, talking about how Alzheimer's funding impacts her personally, relevant to her grandparents. All of this rich media content is, like Alex alluded to earlier, then conveyed back to the partner, which we'll delve into shortly, so that the partner, the media client, can leverage it for broader impact both on their site and their social channels or on air. So we've done quite a bit of user testing and polling relative to our action tools in order to survey individuals and see what they think about it, what we can improve, what suggestions they have for optimizing flow or proximity or location. And we've gotten unequivocally incredible feedback from individuals. This is just one snapshot of an email that we received from a woman named Susan, who was responding to one of our surveys. I'll just read a few lines to give you the gist. She says, "I found this tool incredibly useful and informative. I have to say I was skeptical initially, but it's such a great idea. It exposes me to information that isn't easily attainable as a private citizen. It's changed my perception of your news organization, and I do follow your news more often than before." She continues on to offer a really thoughtful suggestion that ended up being implemented. So what happens with all of this content that's being generated and the opportunity for engagement that we're lending to individual users, readers, and viewers? Well, there's a back-end component to Countable, to the front-end engagement tools that Alex showed you earlier. We essentially provide our clients with unique login credentials to access their analytics dashboard. It's programmatically updating, and it lends us a handful of different insights that are relevant to them in optimizing their work. It shows a breakdown of performance metrics from impressions to engagements to conversions. It breaks that down both in absolute tiles or metrics and also in relative percentages, conversion rates, click-through rates, and the like. We'll laundry list all of the individuals who have taken action and then provide that via CSV export to the client so that they can import that all of that lead generation back into their CMS. We outline all of the user-generated video messages that have been collected with playable thumbnails so that our partners can view the content in the dashboard, then download that content, and then upload it to their website, to Facebook, to Twitter, mold them into a little video montage that's playable in a subsequent human interest piece, etc. We also break down all of the lawmaker messages that have been sent to lawmakers via the civic action tools. And you can actually, the dashboard's interactive and you're able to play around with it and actually see, well, how many messages have been submitted to lawmakers in state X or state Y, and how many, per this slide, how many individual lawmakers have received messages and how many messages have they each received. We also lens insights into engagement practices from a user perspective, traffic tendencies, whether or not individuals are engaging with your tools on mobile, and if so, Android or iOS or on web, so that you can gain more insight into how users tend to engage with your stories, and similarly, social sharing insights. As a product of the data that we garner from viewers and readers, we're able to follow up with quite a bit more insight into their audience than they tend to have otherwise. So you can see the type of stories that tend to perform most elevatedly. You can also see a breakdown of keywords and titles that tend to elicit greatest engagement in their respective pieces. We're able to give you an idea via heat map of who your users are and where they're concentrated, so that you can focus your newsroom on stories that pertain to those different geographical distributions. Similarly, we provide little snapshots into audience profile so that you can get a sense of who your viewers or readers are, where they're coming from, the kind of work that they do, and what issues they're going to tend to care most about. And most interestingly, we're able to convey back time spent on page. And we were really excited to find that actionable content that has our embedded tool sets into it, embedded into it, tends to perform even better than general stories. Users tend to stay on action stories for anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds longer than generic stories that don't have actionable tools embedded into them. So there are a handful of things that we've learned throughout our respective media partnerships that we found particularly interesting and would want to pass along as some best practices. The first thing you can see rendered on the left-hand side of the screen refers to a widget wrapper, which is essentially a static HTML wrapper that surrounds your civic action tools, that gives it a unique brand identity. Though Rick Kaplan, our SVP, who, like Alex said, has been in the journalistic world for a really long time, wasn't able to make the call today, he did send along a handful of thoughts that he asked us to convey. One of them is perfectly relevant to branding right here. So I'll go ahead and I'll read off, and I'll sort of channel, as Alex said, some of Rick's thoughts. Quote, media outlets need to choose the right stories to be successful with actionability. They need to embed their tools into content that tugs at the heartstrings, evokes visceral reactions, is timely, and has a sense of urgency. This will guarantee that readers take action, create content, and engage with the issue. But just as importantly, they need to be intentional about branding. This will help educate their audience and establish the expectation that content is to be engaged with and not simply consumed. And crucially, branding should be proactive and assertive, like take action, engage, or react, which is exactly what you see rendered in the screenshot on the left-hand side of your monitor. On the right-hand side, another thing that we've seen that tends to optimize both engagement and conversion pretty dramatically is introductory or contextual copy that is outside of the widget or the widgets that's embedded into the stories or article copy proper, lending a little bit of context such as, what's your perspective? What do you think about this public policy issue or this civic happening? Or have you had experience with this firsthand? What's your perspective? We want to hear from you. So that it's actually in the flow of the article that they're used to reading, which then prompts them to take a second glance at the embedded tools. Another thing that tends to work really well for our media clients is actively, or I should say more proactively, facilitating conversation and looking for opportunities for audience engagement. So creating a space for audience voice. You can imagine asking really big questions on broadcast, or having text-based features that ask users for their perspective and experience and ideas and suggestions on different issues, and then highlighting the best answers, both text-based and video-based, on air or online, encouraging more audience participation in all of their outreach, social posting, etc., making sure that their questions are timely, poignant, relevant to the news cycle. And then we help facilitate this active conversation facilitation by sending weekly content suggestion emails with big ideas, questions to ask audiences, etc., to all of our media clients. Another thing that we're really excited about is the ability to programmatically follow up with users in segmented or cohorted ways. So you can imagine a user takes action on issue X, or a user takes action on 5 different issues, or a user submits 3 different videos, and all of a sudden we're able to automatically cohort those users and send them distinct follow-ups based upon the conditions that they've met. So that's a pretty good overview of the space, its challenges, some of Countable's ideas for helping to overcome those hurdles, and some of the things that we've done with our media clients from the LA Times and ABC, both news-based, paper-based or broadcast-based, in order to implement and facilitate these changes. So with that, I'll pause the conversation. It's really been a pleasure talking with you and sharing some of these thoughts. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Alex or me if you have any questions or would like a product demonstration or have ideas that you're interested in sort of having a sounding board for. We would love to follow up, and we'll be sure to. Hope that you all have a really excellent afternoon.